All right, welcome to the E-Community Podcast. You heard the introduction to Patrice's podcast, but I'm actually your host, Charles Kearse, with the Urban Impact Movement, the Nehemiah Urban Impact Movement, and we are delighted today actually to be launching the opening of the Charlotte E-Community Center. And interestingly enough, when we talk about Charlotte, for those of you that don't know, Charlotte is a vast and growing region, and it encompasses many different communities. And so I'm sitting in Concord, downtown Concord, where there is a vast history, an African American history. One of the wealthiest guys in North Carolina actually did a lot of his work, had a textile mill here, a black guy that we have a street that's named after Warren C. Coleman here. And so as we tie this into Black history, there's a lot of things going on. Obviously, we've just commemorated 100th year of Wall Street, Black Wall Street. So we're going to bring all of that in, and we're going to talk about how we're going to rise and build. The Nehemiah Challenge. You know, we can sit around and curse the darkness all we want, but until we allow the light of God to shine through us, the love of God to shine through us, then we're not going to do anything significant. And I have with me three powerful men that are making history, right? They're movers and shakers in the world, and they're doing great things. And so I'm just going to go around the room and first of all introduce Dr. Joel Freeman. Dr. Freeman, thank you for joining us today. And Dr. Freeman, I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and tell us where they are, because they're in different parts of the country and the world. And then we've got Dr. Walter Milton. He's a co-author along with Dr. Freeman, and we're going to talk about their book in a minute. And then, of course, we got Mr. Patrice Tsague, and Patrice actually just landed here in Charlotte and will be participating with our coming out party, a grand opening, saying, hey, we're open for business here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we like to have fun. We're going to make some money, and we're going to make a difference. And so, gentlemen, I've asked you to join me today so that we can kind of connect some dots. Like, you guys have authored this huge book, this great project, this Black History Project, BH 360. And it is changing the world, I understand. In fact, I want to start in like one of my favorite parts of the country, Brooklyn, New York. I understand that you guys are right now having an impact in my hometown where I grew up. In fact, I have an interesting story. Maybe we'll get to it later today, but you are changing the world. Tell us about BH 365.
I'll let Joel go since I was late.
BH 365 is a remarkable project that Dr. Milton and I cobbled together over 2.5 years, 12 16-hour days. Yeah, we'll do this in stereo, Patrice. Here's the book itself. Weighs 5.5 pounds. It has 1,248 pages. You can barely open the book without running into images all throughout, over 2,500 images, and then over 2,000 QR codes. So it's very tech savvy. 4 things that we want to accomplish with this is that number 1, to become a critical thinker. Number 2, a compassionate listener. Number 3, a fact-based, respectful communicator. Number 4, an action-oriented solutionist.
Wow. And so tell us how the book was birthed. Obviously, the two of you gentlemen have known each other for a while, and your relationship has grown throughout the years. When did this vision, when did you conceive this vision of putting this project together?
Well, I was a school superintendent for about 13 years, a principal, a teacher, but it really sparked in my spirit early on in my life. And, I had an incident in 4th grade that really resonated with me. My mother and father would always tell me that I'm a descendant of the first group of people on this earth, you know, the movers and shakers of the universe. And so I remember having an experience of going to school, and my teacher, Miss Laudisi, she said, we're going to learn some Black history today. And she put on a film, and it had a white man beating so-called enslaved people. it was traumatic for me that it ushered so much shame and humiliation that I wanted to hide under a table. But one thing that it did, it also contradicted what my mother and father was saying. And so I could see the narrative where they always start off Black history in slavery, which is terribly inappropriate. So I'll go home and I could start debating with my parents and telling them that they weren't telling me the truth. So let me fast forward. So my mother had planted that seed in me. She said, one day you're going to do something with this. And I remember waking up after losing my mother, and I had lost my dad as well. And I should start thinking about what so many students that I was in charge of was lacking. And so I began to do the work, to do the research, to see if this curriculum could definitely work out. And so kind of started the process. And then I said, you know what? I got to call Joel Freeman. And so I called Joel, and it was almost like he was waiting for my call. You know, I was like, man. And so I didn't even have to ask the question. It was there. And then we have not looked back. As Joel says, that we've been in a jar for 2.5, almost 3 years. And I are having some difficulty adjusting back to the real world now, because we're still in that jar, because we went into this with everything that we had. We were on the phone to 2 and 3 in the morning, getting us a few hours of sleep, getting right back up and getting on the grind. So I'm truly honored to have embarked upon this journey with Joel. And I think that this is our love letter to the world. We started in ancient Africa, and we come all the way through past George Floyd. And then with our ebook, we're constantly in a position to update things. And so we have a remarkable team of people, about 70 plus. Like Joel said, we have QR codes. Joel has been the curator of images. Our oldest image dates back to 1553. And we have images that people, the world has never seen before. We have great partnerships with our board. I'll let Dr. Freeman talk about some of the talent that we have on our advisory board as well.
Wow. Dr. Milton, I want to take you back for a minute to that confrontation, if you will, with your mom, your parents, as to you were getting information from the school system, and they were teaching you back from a historic viewpoint and their viewpoint of the greatness that was in you and where you've come from. And you're telling them that they're lying to you. I can only imagine. So growing up Brooklyn to a single mom, even beyond the police, I feared my mother, Eloise, and I would have never had that conversation, right?
That was my mother's name.
Oh, really? And interestingly enough, though, I can imagine, because they were operating from their paradigm in their education and what they wanted for you, and yet you were trying to be boxed in by the system.
Yes.
And so obviously they taught you well, right? And they prevailed. Thank God. And so tell us more about your upbringing. Were you reared in Texas?
No, I was reared up the street from you in Rochester, New York.
Oh, Rochester. Okay. Where it's real cold. I've got family up there and I'm still trying to figure out why. It's too cold. Yeah.
That's why I love Texas so much.
Okay. Yeah. Nice and warm.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
No, I was going to say I went to college, undergrad at University of Albany. I played football there for 4 years. And then I went to the University of Rochester for graduate school, and then a small college for a postgraduate degree at Brockport. And then I did a doctorate, EDD, and PhD at University of Buffalo. Wow.
And no wonder you're in Texas, because all of that travel up there. Buffalo, another cold place. So where did you and Dr. Freeman meet? I want to get to the genesis of that, because that's important, right? There's 3 things that I'd like to focus on as we kind of shape this conversation today. Is really a mindset. And then secondly is developing the skills. And obviously through education, you've developed great skills, but then access. You know, you've got Dr. Freeman. He's a great guy. We're going to hear more from him in a moment. but to be able to have access and not only to dream big, but to have people in your corner to help those things come to pass. How did you guys connect?
Well, it's interesting. I've known Joe. We've known each other, as Joe would say, it's about 2 decades, if you will. So there was a gentleman from my hometown, Rochester, New York. I was a superintendent in Springfield, Illinois, the state capital, and he kept telling me about this guy named Dr. Joel Freeman. So I'm like, man, he says, you got to meet him. You got to meet him. It got to the point where he was doing that on a daily basis. Did you call Joel yet? Did you call Joel yet? I said, okay, well, I'm going to take the plunge. So we had Joel come out to the district. And so I'm thinking that Joel is at least 7'5", because the guy was speaking so highly of him. And, so, and it was just like we had known each other all of our lives. And I remember calling my wife and I said, man, I love this guy, Dr. Freeman. I'm going to bring him over. I want him to meet my family. And I rarely do that. And I just felt that comfortable because he at that moment, he just became an important person in my life. And it just seems like the synergy was already developed and designed. And the only thing we had to do was physically meet each other face to face.
Wow.
That's what happened. And, Joel does a great job. Sometimes you get too busy and you don't reach out to people, but he will do a great job of reaching out. And sometimes I would just, talk to him about some of my vicissitudes and challenges that I was having. As a leader, we'll talk about a lot of things, but we have some things in common, a foundation, a belief system. And I think that's what has really carried our bond to where we are today.
Wow. So before we get into Dr. Freeman, to our listeners, we're opening up the Charlotte E-Community Center, the Nehemiah E-Community Center, and we're directing and very intentionally making sure that we're not leaving anyone behind. And we're taking the skills, the education, the experience, all the things that we as men and women of God have experienced. I believe that we are in the earth for such a time as this. And there is a resounding challenge on the inside of my spirit that we must arise and build. And I emphasize the we, because it's not a black thing. It's not a white thing. It's not a Latino thing. It's not an Asian thing. But we must arise and build. And each individual has an assignment on the wall to rebuild the wall, yes, spiritually, but economically, and that we might then take this gospel of Jesus Christ around the world and help people to find their place. Now, when we talk about Black history, it starts way before slavery, right? And the beautiful thing that God has connected the dots to bring us to this place where we can connect the world. Because the Great Commission is to go ye into all the world and preach the gospel. And then he says that we're to love our neighbors to ourselves. And I love the fact that the two of you have put together this love letter to the world, a 5-pound love letter to the world that will be your legacy forever and ever and ever, because I believe that the work that you have done will change the world forever. Now, because of that, to whom much is given, much is required. And so as we dream big, obviously we start small, and this conversation is just part of that small conversation that's necessary to be had. And Dr. Freeman, you and I have talked and connected, but really the connection is with you and Patrice. So I'm going to go to you first, and then I'm going to come back to Patrice and tie this back into how we can see God bring revival to urban communities worldwide. And taking young men, of course, we're not as young as we used to be, but we're still young as it compares to what the Bible calls old. None of us are 100 years old, and the Bible starts calling people old when they get 100. So we're very young, but there's a lot of work still to do. So Dr. Freeman, talk to me about this love letter that you've put together and your why, because obviously there's a distinction amongst friends here that you're a white guy in America, We're black men in America. I like to kid with Patrice. Patrice is an African in America having an American experience. It's different than being an African American. But since we've talked and learned to actually know each other, I gave him back his black card because he was in the D.C. Maryland area. He's a true brother. And so, yeah, Dr. Freeman, talk to me about this love letter that you guys have put together and your why as a white man doing this work.
Well, thank you, Charles. Yes, what happened with me is I grew up in Alberta, Canada, a little town of 2,000 people with 9 ice hockey rinks in it. So we played a lot of ice hockey from late October to early April. And I left home when I was 17, started hitchhiking all around North America, long-haired hippie, dope-smoking fool. And I traveled probably 6,000 miles around North America with my thumb. And when I came to U.S., I just, I was born in Maine, but still had spent most of my early years in Canada. It's like, what the heck is going on down here? I couldn't quite figure out the whole race relation issues that were happening here. And so what happened is I ended up having a conversion experience in 1972, September 10th, around 10 o'clock that night. Signed up for Bible school the next day. And about 7 years later became chaplain for the Washington Bullets. That's a whole nother story, the Wizards in the NBA. And that what happened is that, of course, I had no mentor. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had to love these guys unconditionally and keep confidences and just keep on loving and reaching out to them. And what happened is that they began to ask me questions to check the seams of my soul to see if I was trustworthy, worthy of their trust, because their position in life attracts a lot of insincere people. And so what happened is that I began to, they asked questions about, what did Jesus look like and what part did people of African descent play in biblical and extra biblical history. They didn't ask it quite like that, but that was what they were asking. I didn't have a clue. It forced me to start studying. And then I ended up co-writing another book. And that's the reason why Walter and I connected, is that this young man in Springfield had read the book. So he was calling Walter almost every day. He was calling me almost every day to call Walter. So it just was his tenacity. And it was like he was getting on my nerves a little bit because he was calling so much. It's like, okay, what do I need to do to stop this? And I need to call Walter, and Walter need to call me, so somehow we connected. But it was through that book that called Return to Glory, about the rise and the fall from Isaiah chapter 18, that really pulled me in. So it was not the social issues, it's not the justice issues that pulled me in. That's why I'm a big fan of gateways. When I'm talking with someone, I want to know, what is the gateway for this particular person? It's not one size fits all. For some, it's entrepreneurship. For other person, it might be history. Another person, it might be religion. Another person, it might be whatever, but to kind of figure that out. And so what happened is that once I began to understand about Isaiah chapter 18, it was written to a people beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, tall, smooth of skin, awesome to be feared from the beginning onward. In the King James version, it says that they were terrible from the beginning onward. And that's the phrase, terrible from the beginning onward, that really captured me. Because I know that the Bible is not given to hyperbole or exaggeration. And so there had to be some extra biblical evidence that supported that. I connected later with Ivan Van Sertima, a noted author who passed away in 2009. And I just, every day, if my wife was here, she would say that every evening, I would go to the library, it's pre-digital, and I would get videos out, about Eyes on the Prize, Part 1, Eyes on the Prize, Part 2, Africa, A Voyage of Discovery by Basil Davidson, 8-part series from the BBC, and a bunch of other videos. And every evening, I'd get my notebook out. In the house, the kids had to be quiet, everything quiet, and I would watch a video every evening.
Wow.
That would help to school me, to help me grow. And of course, reading a lot of books. And then that helped to prepare. A lot of people say to us, well, how long did it take for you to co-write this book with Dr. Milton? And I just say, well, it's kind of like a preacher or a professor that's given this incredible speech or message or something like that, and a young kid comes up and says, "How long did it take you for you to prepare that?" And you look out the window, kind of grandly, look back at the person, say, "About 25 years." And
A
that's really,
lifetime. Yes.
when you start connecting the dots of all the different things that God has dipped Walter in his life experience, all the things that he's dipped me in my life experience, and then bringing that all together, connecting all these dots together, there's nothing wasted, nothing wasted at
Right.
all. And
Yeah.
even the development of the collection, 3 times I had it under contract to sell it to somebody else. And serious dudes, serious people that were interested in buying my collection,
Hmm.
but nothing seemed to work. And so when it came time for this project, even the way the development of the Black History Collection, I'd pass over 250 incredible items and get to the 251st item and say, that's the piece right there. That helps
Hmm.
to tell the story.
Hmm.
And so even looking back unconsciously, it's like God was orchestrating things in the way that he even inspired me and Walter in the things that we were doing and saying and researching to be able to connect at this point. And of course, Walter, this is not my experience. The Black experience is not my experience in America. It's
Hmm.
Walter's. So I view him as the trailblazer, as the keeper of the razor's edge, because when we get into this topic, there's so many minefields, and it's easy to get way over here to become too militant, or over here not militant enough, to be
Hmm.
too up, too Pollyanna-ish, too down, too depressing and discouraging,
Hmm.
or too right, too left politically. So we have this razor's edge that we call truth centrism, and Walter is the keeper of that razor's edge in our relationship, and the
Hmm.
way that we pull this whole project together.
Wow.
And so even the way we built the LLC, that it's majority African American owned and operated. When you look at our team, and when you see what's behind all this, the experts, somehow, I don't even know how it happened, but
Sure.
this one person would come, and this person knew this other person knew another person. And then this whole team is coming together, and you look and you say, oh, that's an ex-superintendent. That's an ex-deputy superintendent. That's a person who was directly connected with Kathy Hughes for years, and you start bringing all these people together, and you just realize, even on our advisory board, to have folks like Ambassador Andrew Young and Kathy Hughes
Mm.
and also Smokey Robinson and Bill Haley Jr., Alex Haley's grandson, and Ben Watson, NFL player. To have all these people and some historians coming together to be part of our advisory board. I mean, we
Mhm.
just look back at all this and we go, how is this happening? And so I'll just turn it over to Patrice.
Well, and so my question again in connecting the dots, and there's a purpose for connecting these dots, and nothing's wasted in our lives. And as you have lived long enough, you realize that when God is up to something, God is up to something big. And I believe that God is up to something, and he has laid a foundation. We greatly appreciate the work that you gentlemen have put into this and the collaborative that has come together to give us a real understanding of potential of a people that have, for the most part, been denied here in the United States of America. Now, we have all experienced individuals that have accomplished great things, but in general, as a people, we have yet to see our full potential, I believe. And part of that is I come from Brooklyn, New York, single mom, and a thug, if you will. And I sit here with 3 gentlemen that are acclaimed, and I'm going to introduce Patrice, who needs no introduction, but to our community, just being able to tie these things together and helping people to understand that God is at work in their lives right now, and all the things that they've been going through has gotten them up to this point, and they will become, as you talk about, Joel, an overnight success, even though it took 25 years to get there. All right? Because when God puts you through the fire and through the water and he purges you and he sets you up for your finest hour, I believe that we'll begin to see those diamonds in the rough, those hidden Einsteins to come out of urban communities to really be to solve problems in the world and bring it to the marketplace. And so, Patrice, you came to America from Cameroon. Your parents sent you here to, your mom sent you here to grow up, and you've become quite the young man, the leader. I believe that you're a Joseph to not only here, urban communities here in America, but to Africa. And I believe that your finest days are ahead of you. And I want to be able to connect the dots of how you and Dr. Freeman came together. And Dr. Freeman, I'm coming back. You kind of, brushed over the fact that you were the chaplain for the Bullets. And we're going to get back into that, because if you talk to individuals in urban communities, especially young people, they talk about sports and entertainment being a way out. I certainly want to emphasize that education, entertainment, sports needs to be a part of that conversation, a great part of it, but every industry, and to be able to capture that and relationships. So, Patrice, you've developed this awesome platform, the Nehemiah Project. It's a ministry / business development organization. How did you and Dr. Freeman, as you were developing this vision, God's pouring into you, how did you guys connect in the Washington, Maryland area?
Well, first of all, thank you, Charles. And unfortunately, I'm just going to greet and say a few words, and then I have to jump off because I have Kenya over there waiting. But I do want to thank God for Dr. Walt and Dr. Freeman for this great work. Dr. Freeman was a hometown hero when I was growing up in Washington, D.C., especially when he came out with the Return to Glory material. And so what an honor it is years later to be collaborating with him. And one of the things that I appreciate most about him is that he's always been a fan of our work, reaching out. Dr. Walter talked about his tenacity, I don't know how he does it, to be honest, because I can't keep up. He has a unique ability to nurture relationships unconditionally. It's just, I've never met somebody with that kind of gift, to be honest with you. And because of his passion for entrepreneurship, what he didn't talk about is some of the stuff he does on the entrepreneurship side. I think what makes him unique is that, he was doing marketplace ministry before it was something that we do now as a formality, right? He just didn't know it was marketplace ministry. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, if you go to Washington, D.C., if you take it back to the 90s, Dr. Freeman would be the guy. And so we grew up in that ecosystem, and fast forward, he's kind of kept track and took notice of what we're doing, and always went out of his way to encourage and to remind me and our team of the great work because of his passion for entrepreneurship. And so that's kind of how we connected. Now, going forward, I have made a commitment to him. We're going to take him to Africa because he's been there before. I'm not taking him back to me. But because of that entrepreneurship element, he's one of those guys who have such he's a top talent guy with such multiple dimensions that whether it's history, whether it's theology, whether it's entrepreneurship, or whether it's sports, or whether it's civil society, he's a Renaissance man. And so we are just excited and pleased to really affirm and acknowledge the group they're doing. But more important than that, through the urban impact, to see what we can do to get that message out. Mm-hmm. So Charles, you have to forgive me, my friend. Because
no, that's fine. I know you have to jet. I appreciate this connection, this introduction. I'll take it from here, Patrice. And by the way, make sure you tell Kenya and Frank that we won one of the urban entrepreneurs won the business plan competition, the national business plan competition. And we'll see them in the international business plan competition coming up here at Nehemiah Week. So it's kind of like no one wants to miss Nehemiah Week. Tell them to join us at Nehemiah Week because there's some big things happening over here. Thank you for joining us, Patrice.
I will. A quick story. Charles wanted us to make sure there's an urban, and we said, Charles, they have to win. Well, the good news is they did win, and it was not affirmative action, and so we'll see what happens, Charles.
That's right. That's what
Thank you,
we're
guys.
growing people with excellence. We're finding them. All right.
Amen.
Thanks,
Thank you
Patrice.
so much, guys.
Thank you, Patrice. Nice to see you.
So gentlemen, as we continue the conversation, we're right now in Charlotte, well, Concord, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. I hail from Brooklyn, New York. Actually did my schooling up in Massachusetts, raised my kids in Springfield, Massachusetts. I'm a veteran, did some military time. And so the accumulation of life experience has me here now to lead this urban impact movement. And the reason why we call it a movement, because we simply want God to do something bigger than all of us. And we want it to not only be one generation, we want it to be multiple generations and building community wealth and really taking an asset mapping of everything that we have at our disposal and then being intentional about it. We just commemorated Black Wall Street. And Black Wall Street, I actually went to school. I played football for the University of Tulsa and did my Bible school training out in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. But Black Wall Street was intentional. And it was intentional to the extent that it was forced entrepreneurship by necessity because of the day. And I'm talking to two historians. I don't need to tell you that. But out of that turmoil and that fire, they built the wonderful Greenwood community. And you had great, successful professionals. And it was self-contained. And now we find ourselves in an environment where when you think about Black communities, oftentimes you think about the hood and you think about, the crime and you think about the world of hip hop and the thugs and all of those things. And that's simply not who we are as a people. And I appreciate the work, your body of work that you're doing. And we want to be able to bring all of these things together. Sports, Joel and I, we were talking about, in fact, this evening we have an event that's tied to this event where we'll be at Top Golf. Top Golf is a gateway to the world of the golfing industry, which is $84 billion. And there's only a few African Americans that actually participate in the game because of the white claws that they had for many years. But right now, the world is open. And I want to ask you today about the work that you're doing, the conversations, because you guys are having difficult conversations. You're dealing with the elephants in the room. And oftentimes, and I'm going to bring one up. I'm going to bring up the elephant of white supremacy and how it's played a role in American history to oppress and keep people down as opposed to releasing the brilliance of all people. How would you walk into a room and say, hey, let's talk about white supremacy in light of the work that you're doing?
Well, it's one of those things. It's a reality that we contend with. And I think that before we would enter into that conversation, because it's going to be emotional. Like Joel says, that it's always vexed with those kinds of things. But we would probably break the ice to try to find a commonality and then begin to deal with that ugly truth. Because what happens is that if we came out with it, it's going to automatically create resistance, denial, and all of those things, and confrontation. So we kind of work from the inside out opposed to the outside in, if you will. There's a lot of discussion going on that I've heard, and I've learned to be a good listener, that integration was the death of Black people. That had we stayed segregated, with the talent, with the ingenuity, with the creativity, we wouldn't be in the onslaught of trepidation that many of our communities face to this day. And that's a relevant topic, whether I agree with it or not. There's a lot of passion behind it. But I really think that we have to have the courage and the ability to peel back the layers. And I know that Joel has had some challenges to take this topic on and to be attacked by people that look like him, for willing to, stand up in the seat of righteousness and to speak out against any form of injustice whatsoever. But to answer your question head on, I believe that it's a relevant topic, and I think that we must unpack that topic, and then we have to find a way not to give that kind of credit to people to have power over us, where we have to gain the power and the momentum amongst ourselves.
Mhm.
And I believe the way that we do that is creating models that you're creating models that's going to really bring about a strong sense of unity in our house, and then begin to spread that unity outside of our house. If that makes sense with everyone,
Sure,
because
sure. When
there's
you,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. When you think in terms of particularly the Nehemiah project and the challenge, let us arise and build. We must come together and rebuild and build together, as opposed to having opposing forces. We are the United States of America. And if we are the United States, yeah, we can agree to disagree, but we don't have to be disagreeable. And Joel, you spoke about the need for trust in dealing with your players, with the Washington Bullets. The trust factor can only be gained truly when you think in terms of a positive, productive relationship, because there's win-win-win across the board. And I can trust you because I can see that you value the very things that I value. We value family, we value community, we value education, we value God, the Bible. We value, if we value the same thing, and it could be of different religions, we don't care. But if we're working for the common good, then as we come together and bring our minds to the table and have the dialogue, the conversation. I love in your book, you talk about the art of the talking stick and being able to listen and give way to conversation, difficult conversations, and having a skill to do that. Speak more to that talking stick concept.
Yeah, what we have designed is we want the students or anyone, because this textbook engages all ages.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's an entrepreneur group, if it's a community-based group, if it's a church, a corporation, and doing a lunch and learn type of process, what we do is, first of all, the first meeting is not even about Black history. It's not even about white supremacy, to your point, to your question prior to this. It's it's about the developing rules of engagement in the group that is created by the group, and then if anyone breaks that bond, that code of conduct, if you will, made up of we will not statements. It can be two guys, a white guy and a black guy, meeting every Tuesday for lunch and saying we're going to deal with one elephant experience every week and prepare, study, and then come together. And but develop first of all the rules of engagement, because if people don't develop the how, then when they do the what, it's going to cause a lot of consternation and a lot of hurt feelings, things being said, emotions elevating on both sides, on all sides. So once that has been established, then we can bring in the talking stick. Now this is an example. This is what we use in the textbook. This is from the Tsague tribe of Angola in the mid 1800s. And it's about 15, 16 inches long. And you see at the top, there's the chief or the king playing a kalimba, an instrument. We call it a thumb piano, something like this. And one historian expert told me that the reason why there's a musical instrument on this talking stick is because music transcends generation. And so that whoever it was pictured here was connecting with the younger and the older generation and the people in between. There might have been 2, 3, 4 generations present in the tribal system, but he was connecting with everybody. And so then we segue from this, where the students or anyone that is participating with this can develop their own list of what is important about good communication. listening skills, asking open-ended questions. What are you thinking when someone else is talking? Are you plotting your next response, or are you actively listening? Those types of things. And then to identify maybe 5 to 10 of those elements and adopt it for that classroom setting or that group coming together. So maybe, and then adding artifacts, because they're going to create their own talking stick. To add artifacts like a button that reminds them to remain open with each other, a feather to have wings to get to the point, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then now the first 3 weeks or so actually use the talking stick. But then after that, it becomes a metaphor. And the teacher can say, hey, Timothy is a talking stick, Sally. You know what that means.
Sure.
And it becomes something that begins to help to govern, not constrict conversation, but govern the conversation, so that that people will get more to the point of the issue rather than trying to win an argument. And also to make it so that they have to study. I don't know if you ever were involved in if you were involved in debate in high school or something like that, but you have to know both sides. So it pries people loose from their confirmation bias bubbles, and then brings them to understanding what the other side is all about. So on one side, you have maybe someone with a conservative viewpoint, over here a liberal viewpoint politically, and or a pro or a con viewpoint. And then what happens is that then you can begin to really understand, or it was Augustine back in the 4th century said, seek to understand before seeking to be understood.
Right.
It doesn't preclude the need to be understood. It doesn't even guarantee that one will be understood. But it's the whole idea of seeking to understand, then seeking to understand some more, seeking to understand some more. 2 ears, 1 mouth. We learn a whole lot more by listening than we do by speaking.
Sure. So I know that the book is designed right now, at least in the initial phase, to get into the school system. But I view it as a tool for society as a whole. And my application to that is in an initiative we have called Golf for Change. And you'll hear me talk about golf. First of all, I love the game of golf because it's a tool that I use to help train up emerging leaders. But it's a great tool that I use to bring people together, to connect people, and to give access to people that don't have access, to discover how to get that access. But then it's a conversation piece. So Golf for Change is actually met my partner, Garrett Garland, on a driving range. White guy, he's a veteran, very distinguished guy, hits the ball like a pro, actually is touring North Carolina right now. Still, he's 75. He still shoots in the 60s.
Wow.
Very distinct. Yeah, very distinct. You guys, if you play golf, you will be playing with him because we're going to host an event, a Golf for a Change, in an area near you, at a Top Golf near you, right? And so he says to me, this is after George Floyd's murder. He says, I'd like to be able to bring, 40 of my white friends together, if you can get 40 of your black friends together, and simply for us to have conversation and talk. Now, little did he know that I had already been working in the industry to make sure that we afford people the opportunity that don't understand this game of golf, how to get access to individual decision makers. And oh, by the way, golf is the most philanthropic sport there is. And it's a tool, it's the networking tool that, in fact, you do need to have in your toolkit if you're going to grow in your professional career as well as in your entrepreneurial journey. And so I envision, and we'll try it out as I learn more about the talking stick, getting a talking stick, having these individuals, white guys, black guys, Latino, doesn't matter, Asians, come together and govern our conversation, because we want to deal with some real stuff, right? We want to deal with stuff that nobody wants to talk about. And these are men and women that are coming together, and no one should have to walk on eggshells. So let's deal with the elephant in the room, but let's do it in such an intelligent way that we're not offending, because if we offend, everybody's going to take their ball and bat, or in this case, their golf club, and go home. Well, we don't want you to go home. We want you to come back out for an event, 9 holes, a time at Top Golf, what it is, and let's learn each other. And as you say, seek to understand each other so that we can be creative and growing forward. So That's one application. I imagine that there will be many more applications of your body of work. What are you seeing in the marketplace, and how can we help you here in North and South Carolina, which is where I'm piloting these things now? And then, of course, have golfer will travel. So, in both of you having roots in that Northeast corridor, of course, I don't want to get too far up to Buffalo and in Rochester because it's too cold. I'll go up there in the spring and the fall, but in the wintertime, no, I need to be in Florida.
Texas.
And of course, Maine, I absolutely love Maine, Joel. So we have to also, plant something down in Maine and all of New England. How can we serve you guys better in this initiative?
Well, and I do have roots in South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, my father's folks are the Gullah people from Charleston.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So man, we are planning a golf event here with our foundation. What Joel and I are trying to do on the foundation side of our company is that we're trying to raise over $100 million to place in the hand of every police officer and state trooper in this nation a copy of the text, as well as train them voluntarily in their precincts or the academies. Because if we can save one life with that initiative, it's worth it. And so we would love to talk with you offline. And by the way, I'm a golfer. I love to golf.
Okay.
But I love to golf. Actually,
Did you see him quivering with excitement while you're talking about this?
I couldn't contain myself. So I'm excited, and I would love to talk with you.
Yes, sir.
I can even come down to North Carolina. We can play 36 holes in 2 days or whatever.
Yes, sir.
And get things done.
Well, and Top Golf is actually headquartered in Dallas.
So yes, in Texas.
So so that is a resource that we have at our disposal, and it leads to green grass. So here's what's important. Particularly, I love the $100 million, right? So the PGA of America has committed $100 million to help to alleviate disparities in Black communities, right, as a result of the social unrest that we experience. So part of what we're doing is really leading up to a time at the President's Cup, which will be in Charlotte, North Carolina, and both of you are welcome to be our guest here in 2022. I believe it's August of 2022, because we're saying to the PGA and the powers that be, hey, we've got solutions. You guys are committed to raising money, and they do it. There's no question about whether you can do it in this with this sport. And so we just want to be able to direct the conversation, be at the table, and then build businesses in the procurement chain. So my guest speaker tonight at our event at Top Golf, a gentleman by the name of David Lee Cook. And David is the longest standing African-American vendor for the PGA of America. Ryder Cups, just did the Wells Fargo, the PGA Championship in South Carolina. And he's 81 years old. He's talking about his exit strategy. So I'd love to be able to engage that with this book. That's my intent with BH360, to say, hey, here's a foundation for us to have these conversations. Of course, as a preacher, we can do it with the Bible. But even when we do it with the Bible, we're limited because people only see it one way. But when we look at the history, and now we're able to have conversation, intelligent conversation, could be reactive at time, but hopefully we have an emotional intelligence about us because we're trying to get somewhere. We're trying to rebuild something. We're trying to rebuild an economic system around urban communities that help to bring people out of poverty and out of the ghetto and out of, this thug mentality whereby we have to now go and take something or else. No, how about if we build something that will last a lifetime and generations, so that we are really constructive rather than destructive. So I love what you guys are doing. And yes, we will connect all offline. And I'd love to be able to help you to put those events together so that you get to that $100 million mark. Joel, absolutely. I see you have something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think what is really cool about golf, you got the short game and you got the long game. And some people who spend a lot of time on the short game the long game suffers, in terms of, hitting a 250, 200 yard hit off the,
Uh-huh.
So I think what is really cool about this is that some people are really focused on the short game, and for them to say, let's take a look at the long game as it relates to justice, as it relates to peace, as it relates to race relations, and vice versa. People are always looking for the long game to say, hey, but we have issues right now, and how can we address those? And so there's a metaphor there that perhaps that can fit into the way you develop this discussions around race relations in America and social and justice issues.
Cool. Well, I go ahead, Dr. Milton. I saw you had something.
Yeah, I think learning from Joel is this whole thing around connectivity and synergy. I would love to connect you with a gentleman. I don't know if you're part of a fraternity or not, but he's a member of Omega Psi Phi.
Okay.
But he is not only an avid golfer, but he is really trying to open up the floodgates to introduce golfing to Black students or Black children, DFW, but also nationally. I would love for you two guys to connect.
Sure.
Because I think that all of that can really connect to BH365. One of the things that we see our work is a solution. It's a solution to a problem that has vexed our nation for many years. And there's solutions all in the pages. And I think Joel alluded to it, that it's more than a K-16 textbook. It's a book that engages all ages.
Sure.
And so we believe that if this can get into the hands of as many Americans or many people across the globe, that it can really change the context of bringing us together and coming up with some of those valuable solutions that can possibly save us in many ways.
Sure. I mean, when you think about getting together, and I call it the mastermind, right? The master's mind. It's not going to come from one individual, but it's going to come because we get together and have conversations like this. I mean, I'm literally jumping on the inside because of, first of all, the conversations that we've had today and that we've had in the past, Joel, knowing that God is up to something. Now, I may not know everything that he's up to, but I know that if I give myself to be led by the Spirit of God, then I'm truly a son of God. And if I'm a son of God, then I'm going to err on the side of love. And I'm going to encourage people to pursue their dreams and goals and excellence. And here at the Nehemiah Project, we actually coach them, we train them, we help to give them the skills that they need. But even when you have the access to those that are, have, well-heeled individuals that may have capital to invest, and they have the social connections, the networks that you need to know, to be a part of. It is so important that people know that they do have a place in all that God is doing in the world today. And God is at work. Now, it looks like the enemy is at work, but the Bible says this: where grace abounds, sin does much more than abound. And we know that Jesus gave us the victory, and he's called us to be the head and not the tail, and on top and not beneath. And he's come that we might have life and have it more abundantly. So part of abundant life to me can be found on the golf course or in what I call the urban country club, Top Golf, because I love working on my game and I love to be able to play. I was in the airport the other day, just 2 days ago, and Earl Graves Jr., it was Sunday, Earl Graves Jr., I said, Earl Graves Jr., you guys know Black Enterprise, the magazine.
Yes.
And, his dad was the founder thereof. I said, you're in town for Charlotte. Are you here for a convention? He says, no. He says, I just flew in to play golf today, and I'm going to fly out this evening. I says, well, where are you playing? He's playing at Quail Hollow. I was like, okay, cool. And because of my schedule, I couldn't just give him a ride to Quail Hollow, so he was getting a rental car. But I don't want to be remiss and forget, where can our listeners connect to you online, and how can they find out more about your project?
Go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, we are on Facebook. We're on Instagram. And I think we cover just about all of the social media outlets. Our website is B as in black, H as in history, 365.org.
Mhm.
BH365.org. And Joel, that other address kind of hit me, almost try to intercept that, but it's BH365.org.
Yeah,
And
that's the
also,
short one. I like that. Oh, there you go.
we
So,
dedicated a whole section to Earl Grey Sr.
wow, wow.
Absolutely.
So I will have my physical book because I had him bring the physical book today. I've been meaning to order it, and I've just been so busy and I didn't get it, but I wanted to have it for our event this evening because we'll be talking more about your book today in our event. So here's a question because I know that we're running out of time, but if you were in my shoes talking to you gentlemen today, what questions would you have asked yourself that you want to get to our audience today?
That's a great question. But one of the things that I would say that I would love to get to the audience, that we believe that God's fingerprints, as Joel says, is all over this book.
Yes, sir.
And we believe that this book is something about it that's spiritual, maybe because we pray over every box and book that we send out, or maybe it's designed to impact the intrinsic worth of individuals in this land.
Yes, yes.
As Walter alluded to, we've been in a jar, and when you're in a jar, you can't read the label. And now, I guess the question I would ask is what are people saying about the book? Because what we say about it ourselves is advertisement, but then third-party endorsement of people who have been impacted by it. And the response we've gotten from people across the country is like an educational earthquake that's gently rolling across the country. We had one superintendent in Colorado who, after George Floyd, he's African American. After George Floyd, he found himself hating white people. And somehow, some way, we still don't know the mechanics of the book, but somehow by interacting with the book, a healing came to his heart.
Wow.
And so that's the kind of real world story. A friend of mine I've known since fourth grade. He was hitchhiking in Oregon, and he had a wad of Canadian cash. And if you've seen Canadian cash, it looks like Monopoly money, looks like funny money. And so he was trying to pay at a fast food restaurant, and at the $20 Canadian bill, and then in his naivety, he pulled all his wad of cash out of his pocket, and of course, people waiting in line and everyone in the restaurant was kind of like intrigued by him trying to pay with Canadian money. Finally, he was able to pay. Well, when he got us all ate his hamburger and got back out on the road to hitchhike to I think it was Eugene, Oregon, these 4 black guys that were in the restaurant that were intrigued by his cash and looked at it, they picked him up, and he sat in the middle of the back seat, 2 black guys on either side of him, and they commenced to beat him up and stole everything.
Wow.
And he found a great distrust in his heart toward black people, all black people, from that point on. Because he was just a young kid, probably 17 years of age at the time. And so what happened is he now has a cabin. He lives in Kentucky, lives a cabin in Colorado, coincidentally enough. While his grandkids and his kids were out snowmobiling in January, through that whole month, he was reading the textbook, Black History 365. And he said that a healing took place in his heart because of interacting with the textbook. And so here we have a black gentleman, a white gentleman interacting with the textbook, not knowing each other, and somehow the textbook has had an impact on their lives.
Sure.
And so those are the kind of stories that spur us on, realizing that if millions and millions of kids, students from K through 12 are interacting with this information, and once again, we're desiring to draw people, invite them to become critical thinkers, compassionate listeners, fact-based, respectful communicators, and action-oriented solutionists. If we can impact just a small percentage of our society, our culture today, in this manner, in or outside the classroom, To God be the glory.
Yeah. So on a couple of fronts, number one, in order to have revival, you have to have healing. And because of the Christian community, it demands forgiveness. And you may have been wrong, but we have all done wrong. I mean, but for the grace of God, I sit here 46 years ago now. God spoke to me as I was mugging someone and ripping them off in the streets of Brooklyn, New York. If you've ever watched the movie Brooklyn Finest, it actually opens up in the building where I was doing my dirty work. And then Wesley Snipes actually gets shot in front of a pizzeria that's directly across from where my mom still lives in Tilden Projects. And if you watch that film, that's the environment that I grew up. I grew up 4 blocks from Mike Tyson. So the Mike Tyson special, if you watch that, that was my life. And Mike and I were in opposing gangs. I'm younger. I'm actually older. He's younger than I am. But our gangs, I couldn't walk on a certain side of the street without fighting for my life. And it was through, I tell people my ticket out of the ghetto was football. But my passport to the world has been golf. And Joe, I appreciate a gentleman by the name of Sean Foley, who is Tiger's former swing coach, now Justin Rose's champs coach. He's a Canadian and went to Tennessee State, HBCU, Tennessee State. And Sean is a tremendous guy. He's working on this project with me with Urban Impact Golf, getting golf into the hands of young leaders and helping them to understand how to grow their relationships, how to stay focused on their visions and dreams and so forth and so on. So Dr. Milton, we do have a tool that we can get our urban kids involved with golf, get it to the masses. And again, Top Golf will be a key component to that. But when we look at all that God is doing and we're connecting the dots, I see now why God had put you on my heart to be a part of this Charlotte Center opening, because we get to pilot these things in Charlotte and then to scale them wherever we go. And of course, as Patrice jumped off this podcast, he is now in a room with Kenya. And Kenya is paused and waiting for some of the same things that we're talking about here. And so to be able to really bring this book to critical mass, not only just in school systems, but into churches and individuals that actually need to understand who they are and where they've come from, and not be placed in a box because of their education or lack thereof. I grew up in Brooklyn, so that means I went to school in the Brooklyn school system. Didn't have the best of education because I had to be very entrepreneurial growing up and multitasking. My mom only had an 8th grade education. My dad was the chief number runner in the streets of Brooklyn, New York, but never had time for me. His son met him twice, when I was 5 and when I was 32. And so when we talk about kids and where they are and adults and where they are, we're at a Kairos moment in the kingdom of God to bring these things together. And we have to work together. It is not about the black church, the white church, or the segregated church. It's about the body of Christ coming together and walking out the will of God in love and understanding where we've been, but also understanding that our future is so bright. And so, gentlemen, I thank you so very much for joining us. And we know that God is up to something. And so as we opened in prayer, I'd like to be able to close us out in prayer today. And I don't know, but I'm available. I'm a servant. And I guarantee you tonight, your book will be showcased amongst some very movers and shakers and that will be in the room in the golfing world, as well as here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And this growing, 200 people a day are moving here. It's growing, becoming what Atlanta is. And so this is a great laboratory for us to experiment with some things and also to be able to bring it to where you are. And so if you just join me in prayer as we close out and pray for the audience. Father, I thank you so very much for those that are listening and that will even listen to this broadcast. I thank you for these 2 gentlemen that have joined us today and the work that you've allowed them to do. God, we see your hand all over this. And as Nehemiah said, the good hand of God is upon us. And so he said, we must arise and build. And we hear your challenge and we will heed your challenge. And God, we thank you for arranging circumstances, situations, people, and things, and giving us all that we need to do what you've called us to do in our day. And here's what we know, Father, that everything rises and falls on leadership, and therefore there are generations of leaders that are coming up behind us. Help us to equip them with you in mind, Jesus being the Lord of all. And thank you for just giving us all the wisdom and the resource, the love, the favor, the grace, the mercy, everything that we need to succeed. Because at the end of the day, Father, we want to give your name the glory. We want our lights to shine so that men can see the good works and glorify you. Thank you for your anointing. Thank you for your blessing. Thank you for blessing our audience today. And we give you praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right.
Charles,
that was really good.
thank you so much.
Thank you for
Charles, I was
joining me.
thinking offline, I'll send you everything that it takes to become an affiliate partner.
Yeah. I'm an affiliate, and I just
Okay.
need to sit down and understand it. And
Okay.
then we will attach that to the initiatives that we're doing.
Great.
You guys are going to see some great things coming out of here. And Dr. Milton, I'm going to come to Texas, as
Okay.
well as we will. I'd love to play golf with you 2-3 days and host you. Joe, do you play?
You know, many years ago, when I was pastoring, I decided I was never going to be a good golfer because of the amount of time it would take to become a good golfer. I could become a good golfer because I got the natural swing and all that kind of stuff. I took golf lessons before I even went golfing for the first time because they told me that's what you need to do to learn the fundamentals. But I just, if I play once a year in a tournament where there's a best ball, I get maybe 2 or 3 best balls in the whole tournament, and it makes me feel like a hero.
Sure.
And all the rest of the time, I'm just, their shoulders are getting tired because they're carrying me too much.
Yeah. So have you gentlemen experienced Top Golf?
Yes. I go quite often. Actually, I love the whole concept and investments of driving range. It's an interest that I have that I want to go into one day, because I think that that's where you perfect things.
Yes.
But now, do we have your contact number?
Yeah. So let me give you my
I'll
number.
send it to you.
Okay. Yeah, Doctor.
Yeah.
That'll be great.
Yeah. Excellent.
Apparently, my tech guy is on the other side multitasking because he was supposed to do our exit. But